Okay, YouTube is starting. Just let me know when to hit the record.
Yeah, now we're on the record and we're
All right,
recording.
thank you.
Good morning, it's 9:40, and I'd like to call this hearing to order. We have two cases on the docket. One is the United States Government Department of Navy, case number 451A-10, which is a regular variance. The second is the County of Riverside, case number 6229-3. Madam Clerk, I just wanted to confirm if there are any individuals online desires to provide in public testimony, evidentiary or non-testimony. Okay, and so let the record reflect that no one is present before the hearing board in order to provide any public comments, whether they be evidentiary or non, and so we'll proceed forward with marking the exhibits. Okay, the exhibit number 4 is the stipulation to place the matter on the consent calendar. Exhibit number 5 is a declaration of Craig Haverstick, Haverstic. That's exhibit number 5. And then the proposed findings and decisions, that would be exhibit 6. Exhibit 6, the proposed findings, decision, and order. On the regular variance, is there any deliberation, discussion?
There was a hearing on exhibit.
The hearing board exhibit, oh, that's right. There was communication between Mr. Balakapalan. No, so that would be marked as exhibit. He's 100% correct. I just saw it yesterday. Exhibit HB2. HB2 would be Balakapalan email to parties with suggestions, etc. HB2. All right, any discussion on this matter?
Just going to point the comment I made was they had the variance extending till some point in next year. So I said that it should end of this year. So they corrected it so that the variance, the regular variance end of this year, because the engine hours will reset. And so they'll have a new. However, pointed out, the situation here is, this has come before as interim variance. They have the fire on the island, had run over the 200 hours, but they brought in, it looked like rental perp engines. So they're running those perp engines of those permitted engines. So they're not planning to use the permitted engines, but using the perp engines. And that's the situation right now. So, but the perp engine, I think if you read the correspondence from the attorney, they can use it until they'll have to permit. You have to permit it if it's beyond a year. So depending on the situation of the fire and how soon, I mean, there are repairs. If they don't repair it in time, then they'll have to permit the perp engine. If they don't want to avoid permitting perp engine, they can put the existing engine on service, and then they should probably very quickly file for a variance for the whole year, for next year, so that they have coverage. And that's all I wanted to add.
All right, in addition, Ms. Verdugo-Peralta.
I just wanted to state that they had an ex parte emergency variance that was granted on August the 2nd, and then they had the interim variance on August the 29th. They're also stating, though, that the site will not be able to restore power for at least a year. So I'm sure that we'll be seeing this sometime again, because that would be possibly exceeding their hours again. But in any case, I do vote for granting it as is. Thank you.
Any additional comments from members of the board at this time? I'd like to entertain a motion in the matter of the United States Navy Facility ID number 146536, case number 4518-10. I move that we grant Variance commencing October 31st through December 31st, 2014.
2024.
That's right, I'm sorry, 2024, as to the various devices, applicable rules, and conditions as set forth in Exhibit 6. So second? Moved by Ali, second by Dr. Abraham. Any further question or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Verdugo, Dr. Abraham.
Aye.
Ms. Verdugo Peralta,
Aye.
Mr. Balak-Kaplan.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I was affirmative, the matter is approved unanimously. Down to the next case. Next case is case number 6229-3. Just a quick question, Ms. Diaz. Just want to be clear. Did we not receive a similar case or this case before? Why weren't they amalgamated? This case and the previous? Just kind of.
I can explain that.
Riverside case.
Right, because it appears, because this, I went back and looked at all the history, and all these cases have always been amalgamated.
Well, no, not really. If you, the week before we had Verizon Wireless come in, two different locations, they actually separated out, separate petition. So because they're separate unique IDs, unique locations, they should be getting a separate petition. I think what happened in one case, this was in 2019, the county, it was permitted as one location. During the hearing, we found out that they were about 1.5 miles separate from each other. So I made a comment that they should get separate IDs, and they did get separate IDs for that. However, I think they filed and nobody caught it or together, but nevertheless, I think any of the rule, if you look at the rule says a source, and source in the definition is a facility. And so each source, the petition should be filed for each facility basically. And the definition of facility includes a source or sources. So that's why, you don't, just like we don't group, if that's, we don't group these facilities together under a one ID because they're different location. That's the fundamental practice in creating a facility ID. Because of unique location. So each location gets its own unique ID. They're not grouped because of other ramifications of users review and so forth.
But wasn't this petition not initially filed as one document?
Yeah.
So how did it, Madam Clerk, because I know you received these documents. How did the bifurcation come about?
The Verizon case was filed separately because it happened at different times. One came in on a Friday, the petition was filed on a Friday, and the situation for the fire, I guess, happened somewhere else. So they weren't filed together as one. You can't, when it's filed, you can't just add it to it afterwards. This one came in, and I was helping the petitioner with it because they were not familiar with the process.
Now, and again,
at that time, let me finish, please. At that time, when I was helping him fill it out, I told him to send it to me again so that I could take a look at it the next day to make sure it was filled out properly. And at that time, he told me that he was going to be filing another petition because now it affected another area. The fire started in Orange County and crossed over into Riverside. So now they had two locations. So in the past, the practice has been if the facts are the same company, same equipment, then we put it on one. You can put it on one petition. That has been our practice. I have looked up other ones. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, has been our practice. So that's on my direction. That's what they did.
So I guess what my concern is, again, I'm about efficiency, as many heard me discuss this time and time again. this is the county of Riverside, not a company. It's a public entity. So of course, they're fighting fires and what have you. They don't necessarily have time to come out and file petitions and so forth. But if it's been the practice, and that practice has been sustained by hearing boards over the years, I'm not for certain why we should deviate from that practice.
Especially in this case, I feel like it was a fire that started, that crossed over. It was the same facts. It's going to be the same facts. It's the same situation. It's a fire that crossed over into Riverside.
It started in Orange County, crossed the line, unforeseen. So when the initial petition was filed, it hadn't crossed the line, and then they came back and
And because we hadn't processed it yet, I just told him, go ahead and add it on to this petition since it's the same. It made sense to me. And like I said, that's been our practice. And the facts are the same. The district council indicated that in her email.
yeah, of course, I read the document, which is why I couldn't understand why would this be a -3 when there was initially.
Are you done? Can I? It was I who said when I was, when it came for consent, I said they shouldn't be grouped together. They should have separate. So I did not give consent for both of them to be appearing on one petition. And I said, because they're each unique, different facility, different location, they should have their own petition. So that's what so we heard the one from Corona last week, I think, and then now this one is for Lake Elsinore. There's a separate petition. And I looked back to the one where we had combined, and I explained the reason why, because the engineers had incorrectly permitted them together when they should have been separated. So just because I don't know what the past cases are, but if we it's fundamental, process. Basically, each facility, like each location gets its own. That's why we say facility ID and so forth. So I give, this is one example where if you combine, they could be, we had dry cleaners, sometimes they own multiple facilities, the same owner, to combine them. I don't want to go down the road, I think, because there's, again, if you look at the health and safety code, the language and rule 5, I think 10 or 5, one of the rules in the 5 Reg 5, it talks about a source. And I looked up the source, and the definition of source is facility. So it says the petition, it all refers to a petition from a source, basically, which a facility is defined as a source or sources at a location,
So I'd like to hear from other members of the board, because I believe that this issue, first of all, it should have been heard during the presentation pursuant to the district's council stated, as well as what the clerk's office has stated with respect to the past practice of the organization. But again, in this particular unique situation, it's one fire. The fire crosses the line. So then why would there be the need to have 2 separate hearings and expend taxpayers' resources when this all could have been heard previous? Any other thoughts or perspectives on this? Because this is really unique. And so we don't have many like this, but again, it's just a tremendous amount of time appropriated, having to bifurcate the petitions, bring them forward, etc. And had this case not been on consent, then we would have had the county Riverside before us today when they were in the midst of fighting fires. Any thoughts, perspectives, Dr. Spearman?
Yeah, as you said, it happens very rarely, but it sounds like in general, the practices as the clerk described it, and in those cases, I see no reason why we couldn't advise that they could be combined in those similar fact situations, etc.
Any other thoughts or perspectives, Ms. Verdugo-Peralta?
Thank you. I see where it's more efficient to do it that way. I just come from the school, though, that every location is a separate, whether I was calling the utility industry, they always had their own account numbers. That's where my thinking is coming from. But however, I do see that it's more efficient, though, to do it the way they had it set up. So I don't know with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, if there have not been issues with that practice, if that has not come up has not been challenged, I hear, what Mohan is mentioning here, but if I feel like the executive office or maybe even AQMD council, wouldn't they have chimed in if that was not the appropriate way and directed their clerk to have handled those cases differently? I wonder if this is a little bit analogous to how we manage some of the public entity fleets, right? That's multiple vehicles, multiple devices. I get it, but they may not be all. I don't think when we've seen them in the past, they're all parked at the exact same location or whatnot, right? So I mean, it is an interesting concept.
Again, that's a fundamental, we permit a quote, a facility, and there's a specific definition of what is a facility. If you want, I can read it, what the definition, that is a fundamental.
Not about
And
the
I've been in
facility,
permitting, so
case.
that's how
I think
we
it's more
do.
about the case number,
Huh?
though. I think it's less about the facility. We're not saying they should have one facility number, but we're saying, shouldn't the case be seen as one case before the board? That, I think if there was an issue, I feel like legal or counsel would have brought that up in a different way, rather than, I hear your point, definitely different addresses, definitely what Cynthia just mentioned, but that doesn't change the fact that it can be seen as one case.
Again, like I said, fundamentally, that I believe it should be separate. And I gave the example, I made the dry cleaner, it could be a spray booth. A guy could own multiple facilities, then there's a chain, sometimes some of these auto, and they said, okay, we're going to combine because the issues are the same and come under, and you cannot do that because each location has its own unique, depending on where it is, new source review, proximity to residents, or, or even the limit, there's a exemption from offsets and so forth, that applies when you are a facility. So it's based on, the offset is based on a facility location, not, multiple location. So even then the posting of this now on the web, so if you're looking at, let's say next time Lake Elsinore, this same facility has an issue, not Corona, and they file, or you can then go back in the history. How would you have filed it? This 6229.2 would have been filed under county roadside, that creates a lot more, probably if you go back to the history to find out, hey, have they had a problem here before? I'm not sure how the posting is done,
The microphone, there we go.
All of the county on the same case number, that their base is 6229. So if another facility for the county comes in, it would have that same case number, that same base, and it just would have the next increment, which would be 4. We don't open one for each facility because it gets too many.
It's too cumbersome.
Exactly.
So-
So we
so
just
what-
keep it under, so that way you can look it up.
Yeah, and just not to further belabor the point, again, in this particular instance, had this fire jumped 4 counties, then based upon Mr. Balakaplan's rationale, there'd be 4 different facility ID and 4 different case numbers. But because this rare example, they saw the ex parte, they had, and so again, which was approved, ex parte was approved because they're in the midst of fighting the fire. I just believe that for the sake of efficiency, we ought to maintain the cadence that was previously established by previous hearing boards, as well as what has been done in the clerk's office, because we want to help our sister agencies when they're in the midst of calamitous situations, as is the case with a fire.
Can I ask just historically, with the clerk's office, if there was an issue, has the executive office or the AQMD council been like, no, let's go back to the petitioner and refile this appropriately?
They would.
I feel
I
like
mean,
that
I
is
think
what would have
the
happened, and I feel like if
and-
they have not intervened, I hear Mr. Buckland's question, but then I think this is an issue. If you want to raise with, whoever, the governing board, the executive office, or AQMD council, but I don't necessarily think that if this is the clerk's practice, then that's what we should respect.
I think we have to be a little careful with saying this is the practice. If it's a wrong practice, I'm not, continue, too wrong, let me put it that way. The one case that was referenced, like I indicated, it was incorrectly permitted. The two engines were considered, once the engineer was not aware of the location. During the hearing, like I pointed it during questioning, it's 1.5 miles away from each other. So they actually, the compliance inspector then made them get separate ID. It was broken up into then separate IDs, so that So the next time maybe a fire occurred, it might be only at, one of that site,
Personally, my opinion would be that as hearing board members, we should proceed with what is presented before us. And the burden is on AQMD to get that piece right, that when people submit petitions, they're submitted properly, that then they're danced and posted accurately. And if there's a problem there, that is rather than us having to police whether the district handled assigning a case number correctly is kind of my thought on that. But I hear you. I just wonder if I think we might just have to disagree on this one. Whose responsibility is it to assign those case numbers? And if it's not done correctly, whose job is it to correct it? And personally, I don't think that's what my responsibility on this hearing board is, but.
Yeah, again, I could not give consent when they were combined, when I saw that apparent that this is a separate ID and, they could have easily, if they were told, let me put it that way, that, hey, file two separate, because they had the template and everything, presumably they would have done it too,
I think Kai's point too is really important, that we're also looking for ways that the purpose, what is the intent and what are we trying to accomplish here? Not to create additional regulatory burden or in these moments, it is to grant a variance that people can continue to do what they need to do, especially in an emergency, right?
I'm not necessarily, but there's some fundamental things we have. An ID is, you have to look at definition of facility, look at the health and safety, how it's defined. So you cannot just, say, okay, you know what? So when you start combining facilities, then you're going to run into other issues. Okay. In this case, it might have been okay, maybe, because they were exempt and so forth. But if you start doing that and say, oh, let's combine it because it's more efficient.
I think it's also worth noting the difference, I would say, between public entities and private. And so I think if there is, so the word practice or tradition or whatever, but also precedent, so if the precedent has been, we have kind of approached public entities slightly differently, then it's also worth distinguishing and,
Excellent point.
If the district put out a communication saying that we will do this in the future, we'll combine, and that's the practice, then if that's what they want to follow, then put it, I guess, if they want to put that in writing,
Ms. Diaz, did you have a follow-up?
We don't tell the district what to do. This is a practice, again, from the clerk's office, what has been done in the past. I don't see, I think it was the clerk's office, there's nothing that says on the petition or anything that you can't file two. I understand this is a source, each facility, but you can whatever information you need from that, it's separate. When they do calculations of excess emissions, they're done separately for each facility. So I don't see where it prevents, there's something in the rules that prevents more than one facility on there.
You're right. And that Sage point, we're talking about case numbering and not facility ID. Yes. So you can have multiple, which is clear.
Yes.
And so I believe you've heard from members of the board, and so all of us have expressed our sentiment and our regard within this manner. Mr. Balakapalan is extremely right with respect to the facility ID number. However, for efficiency in case filing.
And that comes from our office.
Exactly.
The case number and
facility ID numbers from the district side, the case numbers from the clerk side, meaning you're all the district, but I'm just simply stating to delineate the district, right, their work, and then of course the clerk's work. So I understand the point very well. I just want to make sure that we're never placing a government entity in the middle of fighting a fire, raging fire, placing them in a cumbersome burden to have to come before the board. Certainly this could have all been done previously. I'm glad it's on consent, but I would never want to drag a government agency before the body. Doctor.
One question to Mohan's point. So wouldn't you be able to find that via the facility ID if we went through find or any of these things? So your concern is, oh, what if it would slip through the cracks? No one would know to go to number. But if the facility IDs multiple are listed in a case, when you looked at a facility, wouldn't you say that has come up as an issue in this case?
Actually, that's not the point. The definition of facility, and I can read it to you, in the rule, and we're very, that's very critical. And EPA looks at a source of facility also, each one separately. Okay, so when you combine sources of facility, then you create all kinds of other issues, new source review issue, and so that fundamentally you don't do that in permitting. You don't create combine two IDs for one ID for two locations that are same IC engine, emergency, two different combined under one ID. You don't do that, So that's what I'm saying. That is of if you look into the health and safety code it's not explicitly stated, but it's implied. Let me put it that way. You put the petition for a facility, a source. A facility means any source, a group of sources. That means at a location. When we talk about the ID, so you could have multiple sources at a facility. You could have two engines at that same location. As in the case of the U.S. Navy.
Okay. All right, well then, we probably need to look at, well, I'm not even sure this would be a hearing board rule because this is really just almost like the Dewey Decimal System. This is a categorizing of how the clerk's office handles its business. I just don't want to, again, be an impediment to moving things forward, so.
No, I'll be honest, if it comes again forward for a consent, I'm going to say no again, because that unless I get some, the district puts out district council saying, hey, this is the practice we are going to tell the clerk office to follow, and then I'll accept that,
But don't you think that they would have done that in this case? District council took a look at this, right?
Yes, they
And
did.
so they would have if they had an objection, they would have said so. And then they
I
don't have an objection.
actually, I was surprised when they didn't, so, but anyway, it's here or there.
Okay, all right, well, we'll have to just, hopefully we never get to another case like this with the county dealing with this issue, but if in fact we do, we'll have to just cross that bridge when we get there. All right, so, we just, of course, we're gonna agree to disagree with respect to Mr. Balakapalan's opinion, and hopefully we can find a clear path. I know that the district council did state in the email there was a justification, a rationale. So apparently that was not sufficient. And his perspective is that he would still not grant consent if a matter came like this, irrespective of the district providing what would be a very clear and very forthright perspective on this matter. All right, so we'll go ahead and hear the case. Case number 6229-3. Madam Clerk, no one raised their hands to provide
No.
public comment, non-evidentiary or just general public comment. Okay, the record is clear that no one is body to provide any public comment. We'll move on to numbering these exhibits. The first exhibit will be the stipulation of place the matter of consent, which is 1. The declaration of de Guzman will be 2. Proposed findings and decisions will be exhibit 3. The generator log will be 4. Access submissions copy will be 5. And then there's a HB1, which is communication between Mr. Balakapalan and parties. That's HB1. This is interim. This will be bifurcated. Anyone wants to kick off the discussion as far as a good cause? Mr. Pearman?
Well, per the petition, again, this related from the airport fire, as they call it, starts September 9th. And, they lost power shortly thereafter. Edison was not very forthcoming in terms of when they could restore. And by the 23rd of September, they realized they would exceed the 200 hours. So that's when they started the work on the petition. So I think they did move expeditiously, and it was beyond their reasonable control as to why they had to file without giving the full notice to the public in this case. So I think good cause can be found.
I agree, Mr. Pearman.
Any additional comments? Okay. In the matter of the County of Riverside Sheriff's Public Safety Enterprise Communication number 1624566-6229-3, I move that we find good cause to proceed with the hearing for an interim variance and absence of notice to the public based on our discussion and ability to make findings for good cause.
Second.
Second by Dr. Abraham. Any further question or discussion on that motion? Hearing none. Dr. Abraham,
Aye.
Ms. Verdugo Peralta,
Aye.
Mr. Balaka-Palan.
Aye.
Ms. Pearman,
Aye.
and Ali votes in the affirmative. We're now down to the sixth findings and granting the interim variance. Any discussion on this point?
Just a minor correction to exhibit number 5, where in the heading it says diesel. So that should be crossed out. It's not diesel, it's a natural gas LPG. So it's, and they, when they come in for the regular variance, if they're submitting the same sheet, then they should correct that, It doesn't affect the calculations because they calculate it based on natural gas LPG, so it's fine.
Additional comments? Madam, Mr. Verdugo Peralta.
I just wanted to make note that Edison was able to restore service 5 days later, which after a fire like that, and when it's involved in so many agencies, including Forest Service, CAL FIRE, and then local agencies as well, for them to be able to get that power back up in 5 days, whether it was on a temporary goal or whatever it was, is pretty phenomenal. That doesn't normally happen, but it was the fact that they recognize that this is a public safety communications facility and that they need that is of the utmost importance for them to all be able to communicate amongst each other. So I just wanted to make that comment.
All right, Dr. Abraham.
Clearly here, the benefit to the public and, the harm of not granting this would have been greater. Clearly, this was in the interest of the public and the public at large in general, so would support this.
All right, at this time, I'd entertain a motion in the matter of County Riverside Sheriff's Public Safety Enterprise Communication Facility ID number 162456, case number 622-3. I move that we grant an interim variance commencing October 31st through December 11th, through December 11th. The good cause was established. The petitioners granted an interim variance pursuant to the AQMD rules as well as conditions as set forth and stated within exhibit number 4. The petitioner is granted pursuant to Rule 303, subset P, a waiver from all fees. A copy of the proclamation of the state of emergency is attached and enclosed within exhibit number 4. And I'd like to seek a second.
Second.
Okay. Is there any?
Just the excess emissions you did.
Yes, the access emissions is included in exhibit number 4. I'm sorry, 5. And it's stated in exhibit number 5, okay? Is there a, Dr. Abraham, second, any further question or discussion on this particular motion? Dr. Abraham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Verdugo Peralta?
Aye.
Mr. Balaka-Palan?
Aye.
Mr. Pearman?
Aye.
And Ali votes in the affirmative. The matter is approved unanimously, and these cases are officially closed. We're off the record and adjourned at 10:14 a.m.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.